In this video, I'll be talking about the Monster Hunter Killer that released in 2019, which is currently available on all platforms except mobile, I do believe. In this video, I'll be particularly talking about what the game is, what's happened to it, where it's heading, and can an average Monster Hunter enjoyer beat the game? Let's jump right into it. To give anyone new or returning to hunting games in general, let me give you some context about the genre. By now, you may or may not have heard of a game called Monster Hunter. Dauntless essentially shares the same genre as Monster Hunter, which is hunting monsters. The general gameplay loop of this type of genre is to fight and hunt monsters to then craft gear that you will use to fight stronger monsters and craft even stronger gear. In the case for Dauntless, you are known as a slayer that takes down the monsters known as behemoths that are found inhabiting the many places you'll come across. With several weapon types to choose from, new and experienced players of the genre will be able to experiment with quite a few builds and playstyles. For the most part, the gameplay is incredibly straightforward. This is rarely a complication, or this rarely ever gets complicated until you dive into set bonuses and different trinkets you can slot into your armor, your gear, to improve your damage or your survivability. Before any update had taken place to Dauntless, hunting was all you could do, this being quite similar in comparison to Monster Hunter. As Dauntless is in the same genre as Monster Hunter, it was often compared to it, especially when it was released. It was even named the Monster Hunter Killer, as if those few people believed Dauntless would surpass Monster Hunter, when in actual fact it was more like a healthy rivalry at that time, if anything. As mentioned before, Dauntless did not have too many features that separated it from Monster Hunter. People were wondering some time after the launch of Dauntless what new features they would add to the game. Would there be new content regularly added to the game? And would these new features allow Dauntless to have its own space in the hunting genre? Well, Slayers would have to wait a few months to receive some form of an answer. On July 16th, the Trials was added. Essentially, the Trials are your endgame hard mode speed kills type of game mode in Dauntless. It's essentially who can kill the behemoth the fastest, and you would be rewarded upon your performance. You'd even be put on a leaderboard if you're that good enough. You can either do it solo, you can do it with friends, you can gain currency, and then you can spend that currency to get cosmetics and items and different moves and mods for your weapons. Further down the line, on September the 26th, bear in mind this is still within the year release in 2019, we got a new type of weapon called the Aether Strikers. Now personally, these were my favorite type of weapon because essentially it's just punching the behemoth. You get to do hand-to-hand combat with Aether Strikers, which funnily enough, at the time they were consistently outperforming majority of the weapons in the game, or I think actually all of them. So they did get a nerf, which was a shame really, but besides the point. From December 10th in 2019 all the way until May the 21st in 2020, there was a consistent trend of a new type of hunt added to the game called escalation hunts. Essentially, escalation hunts are one behemoth after the next. You'd be fighting a series of behemoths until you got to the cornerstone behemoth, which is the final boss of the escalation. And every time you completed a stage of escalation, for example, you'd be fighting one behemoth, and then the next stage you'd be fighting two at the same time, you would raise your threat level, and once it got high enough, you could then fight the cornerstone behemoth at the end. Essentially, there's an escalation for every element in the game now, as of the May 2021, when they added the Chronovore, or the Radiant escalation. So yeah, it's literally one for every element, which I find is pretty interesting. I've only done a few, and I haven't done all of them, I'll admit. I only hopped on recently back onto the game, and honestly, it's a bit harder than it was before. I have to admit. I might just be rusty probably, but it feels a bit harder. However, going back to the important chunk of the topic, another really big update that happened to the game, which I believe is the most important update this game's had, was Dauntless Reforged. Essentially, they refurbished the game from the ground up in terms of progression. If you wanted to do any form of progression, it would be through a multi-branching progression system, which you would spend your money on or currency in the game to then get access to different locations, different monsters, different buffs, different items, crafting recipes. Essentially, any form of progress you make in the game, more or less, or I'd say 90% of it to 95% of it, is through this essentially skill tree or progression system tree, however you want to call it. And on the same update, we also got the hunting grounds, which is probably my favorite part of the series of updates they have done, mainly because it just makes the hunting experience a lot more sociable and just casual. It's essentially just an endless stream of fighting behemoths in one area. You get to pick what area you want to go in, and then you dive in, fight a few behemoths with some people, and then you can leave. It genuinely is a very nice casual experience, to be honest. On December 1st in 2020, the Gauntlet hunts was added. Essentially, this was the last big update they had to the game, and it's essentially similar to the escalations, but only in the sense of you're just fighting multiple behemoths one after the other, but you're not fighting two at the same time. Well, as far as I know, I've only seen one after the other, maybe on the higher levels, but I never got that far myself because I only just came back, just checking a few things out, seeing how it was, and I wanted to make the video on the game because I was actually getting interested in it a bit again. So here I am. So as far as I know, Gauntlet hunts are essentially just one behemoth after the other, and you have to do it within a certain amount of time. If you break certain parts or just break parts in general on the behemoth, you then get more time. It seems interesting. I had a go myself. Not really anything different from what we had in the game so far, but I'm sure there's some loot and rewards that you can get to exchange with currency. You probably do with completing the whole Gauntlet mode, at least anyway. So as of me looking for concrete evidence to where the game is going, I haven't been able to find anything. I've only been hearing rumors here and there saying that there's going to be a big update for the game next year. However, I'm not so sure on that, so you might as well hold your breath. However, for anyone wanting or thinking about giving Dauntless a go, I would highly recommend doing so. You have so much content to try out, ranging from the trials to the escalation hunts, the Gauntlet hunts, to hunting in general. You don't even need to do any of those things. You could just go into the hunting grounds and just chill and hunt. Be a nice chill thing you could do. Honestly, it's definitely worth it. I would say it's a good alternative to Monster Hunter. If you ever felt like, oh, you want to get into the monster hunting genre, then definitely give Dauntless a go, because really it is a decent game. Honestly, it's a decent game. I will say, as I've probably said earlier in the video, its replayability is on the lower end. Once you've done what you've wanted to do in the game, it's pretty much done and dusted, to be honest. There's not much other not much else you could do. You just do the hunting, and that's really it, to be honest. But like I said, give it a go. I'm sure you won't regret it.